Longlegs, the coriander, or what do you guys call it? Cilantro of films, of horror films. It's either effective, dread, nightmare fuel for some people, and for others, they'll walk out wondering, what is the big deal? I have seen a lot of people with that realization. People tend to feel strongly about this film. Most people tend to either love it or not understand the hype at all. Last night, I watched Longlegs for the first time and I did a spoiler-free review, but now I am back with spoilers, and let me tell you, we're gonna go deep. This is for people who have seen the film and want to figure it out, or maybe pick up something that they may have missed. This will explain the meanings, the messaging behind the film from my understanding, but it is not a play-by-play of what happens in the film. Go watch it first, then come back here. We're also purely focusing on the film alone in this video and not the marketing promotional materials behind it. I know there's a lot of extra lore on the website. Let me tell you, I've done my research. I have a lot of great information in one place. So if you want to know the meaning behind Longlegs, keep watching and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this video. I do a lot of horror content. In fact, that's kind of the thing on my channel. Disturbing movies, horrors, and thrillers, I got you covered. Let's get straight into some facts. Director Oz Perkins said that the key code to this film is Silence of the Lambs, which I had no idea. I promise I had no idea of this when I did my initial spoiler-free review, but I caught on because it is the same idea. It's the green investigator out of their element, young and seemingly naive. But here's the twist. I'm gonna say that a lot in this video because there's a lot of twists. Oz Perkins wanted us to believe that we were heading into a crime investigation story, leading us straight into the belly of the beast. He conveyed this, in fact, to his whole team, including the art department, cinematography, costumes, everything. But that was just the lure. Let's start with the characters. And you can jump around. I've left everything time-coded. Longlegs. Let's talk about Longlegs first. Longlegs is, of course, the killer in this situation, and although the first time I watched this film, it felt like he was nonsensical, there is a lot of backing to Longlegs the second time you watch it. The actual character himself will go into some dialogue very precisely with what he says, but I do want to say that Longlegs, everything he says is true. And he is revealing the plot the entire film without you even realizing it. But the look of Longlegs is really interesting. Obviously played by Nicolas Cage, he has heavy prosthetics, which I think was such a good idea to hide his really iconic face and let him just act out. As a lot of people say, Nicolas Cage is to acting what jazz is to music. He really performs in a very particular fashion. He overperforms, and I think that that's what worked precisely for this oddball character who is kind of out of this world. Longlegs is a character. Do we believe he's human? Probably. He is a doll maker. But what we come to find out with the film is it isn't just a Silence of the Lambs drama crime. There's a lot of supernatural elements behind it, and Longlegs has to possess these powers. I do like in this film that they kept the reveal of what he actually looked like to a minimum, especially some of the cuts, some of the ways they edited him walking into a place, and when you should have seen his face, it would cut to something else. Of course, the iconic opening of the film where he talks about his long legs being too long for him to fit in frame. The second time I watched it, I felt like I wanted the reveals even more, and I'm glad they finally gave it to us, but I think it was very clever with the mystery angle, only slowly releasing how he actually looked. The first front-on shot that he is there for a substantial amount of time is when he goes to the store and he's talking to that young girl, and he is even doing the cuckoo, cuckoo, slowly revealing his face, and I just think it's part of the masterful kind of lead up and tension that they do with him. I really enjoyed that aspect. But you'll be interested to know that his white makeup is actually inspired by Bob Dylan from the film Renato and Clara, which features bizarre improvised segments. This was a huge inspiration for his strange tangents, which again, they do make sense. I know it sounds really bizarre when you first see it, but when you go back a second time, everything he says actually makes sense and fills in all of what people believe are the plot holes. It's weird because Nicolas Cage has been quoted saying something completely different about the white makeup and how it was a callback to watching his mum put on some cream at night and him opening the door and getting scared. But Oz Perkins himself says it's inspired by Bob Dylan in this film. I do want to quickly pick apart the name Longlegs because there's a lot of other rumors out there about the term Longlegs. People think the name is inspired by Daddy Longlegs because I guess, the father figure in the film, mainly fathers killing their kids. Also, Daddy Longlegs isn't exactly what it appears to be on paper. They're not actually spiders. But again, Oz Perkins has said in interviews that it actually doesn't mean anything. It was a cool name. It felt very 70s inspired, like a lot of the film. It has a kind of this rock glam feel to it. And it's nothing more than fitting the aesthetic of what he was going for. And also sounding a little bit odd and awkward, almost like Nicolas Cage's character, you know, kind of the way he moves, the way he sounds, the way he is. He's just a very awkward character. It's Longlegs. I do want to talk about Cuckooing, and I want to give some credit to Mad Morph Movie Club. I'm going to link all these great sources down below. They discovered something really cool I want to talk about. When he is luring Harker out of her house, he says the term to get her outside, which one could link back to the term cuckooing. And if you didn't know, this is a very niche a legal practice, especially in the UK. It's a term meaning that a trespasser is using someone's house for an illegal practice, usually substance related. It comes from the bird who lays their eggs in other birds' nests in hopes that they will raise their young for them. And you can look at it as Longlegs, actually one of the reveals is that he lived in their house all along underneath. Or you can look at it from the aspect of him delivering the dolls to people who start acting like that's their children, being possessed by them, raising them in some kind of fashion. I don't think the doll aspect works as well, but I do think the idea of every time he says it, then he kind of takes over that nest, that house, and that's how he gets in there at the start. Harker, let's talk about Harker really quickly. I want to address a couple of things. The awkwardness, the awkwardness. I thought she was some silent, mad genius, you know, the way she's psychic at the start and she seems very quiet. She's a Longlegs herself, very awkward kind of person. But later in the film, after the reveal of her having her own doll, I believe that she was possessed in part by this doll the entire time, which is why she could not think straight. She had cloudy thoughts. And evidence for this is the first time we see her have a psychic episode when she locates the house where the perpetrator is. The sound of what we see later as the ball inside the doll's brain, that sound is echoed in that scene earlier, but you haven't heard it yet, so you don't know what it is and what to look out for. Also, when she returns home one time to her mother's house, she gets a headache, she's rubbing her head, and that sound of the ball is in her head. Let's talk about the mother, Ruth. I believe personally the mother has the biggest arc of any character, and we're able to get a full background on what she was like before, as she talks about her being a nurse prior. She also talks about her being religious, deeply religious, and this was clearly used against her with Longlegs. It's almost like she turned her back on religion, kind of sacrificed herself to save her daughter, and the irony in this is that she then went into houses dressed as a nun and preyed on other families. I find she was really hard to get a read on as a personality in the film. I think a lot of people in this film are quite dry. It's not an emotional movie in terms of trying to tug the most out of the character to be relatable on any level. I don't think this film is that kind of movie. It is emotional, but not in that way. And I do think that she's really hard to get a read on, but I think that this is intentional because they wanted to keep her in the shadow for as long as possible for that reveal. I think one of the most important scenes in this film, you're going to see me reference this all throughout this video, is the interrogation scene between Harker and Longlegs. And this is when the true totality of the arc within the mother character comes out. The mother is so important to this story. She is the key meaning behind this whole thing, and we will explain, I promise. But Longlegs says point blank to Harker that he gave the option to the mum, as he did to several other people, that she could either or she would be helping him. In this work, she would have to bow down and get dirty. Get dirty as she cleans, like a mop or a rag, meaning she is doing Satan's work, but in doing so, she is killing herself slowly. I will talk more about the mum in the meaning section. I want to talk about the dialogue because a lot of people were mad about it. This is the comment I got the most People thought the dialogue was very cringy and strange. That is what I loved in it, especially in my favorite scene, which is the Carrie Ann scene. This is when Carrie Ann House is giving this strange ass, almost monologue, and the way she talks is so peculiar, threatening and direct, but also so casual. She says things like, if he surely told me to kill you in this room, I'd do it right now. Just happy as peaches to watch your head go pop, pop, pop. I'm sorry, that is crazy. I loved this dialogue, and I can understand why people, I guess, seeing it in a certain light, it may seem humorous, but for me, it really lent into kind of Lynchian territory, especially Twin Peaks. Just strange terminology, and evil would never speak like humans do, so that made a lot of sense to me. It was almost like Longlegs was talking through her, and she just was vacant. She was not there anymore. You could tell that she had really gone to the dark side. And I think when they weren't using a lot of imagery, which they do, a lot of imagery and symbolism, they were doing so within the language. It was either we'll say nothing or we'll say the most outlandish crap you've ever heard in your life. And that scene alone just really got in my bones. Everything she said and the way she said it, I loved it. You dirties, flirties, all angel bitch. What a quote. Put that on a shirt. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. We've spoken a lot about different characters and my feelings, which I'm gonna do. But I want to talk about some hardcore evidence. Perkins said that this movie is his most personal yet, and a major inspiration for the film was his relationship with his parents. I'm about to blow your mind if you have not heard this yet. His mother kept a big secret from him and his brother when they were growing up, and this is that his father, star legend Anthony Perkins, was, I'll give you his quote, in an interview with People, he said that my father was an actor who had sort of a private life that was not acceptable in the mainstream, whether you want to call him a gay man or bisexual man, everybody knew it, but we were never given any language for it. Perkins then said to IndieWire, everything I try to do, I try to make about myself, only so that it creates a truth for me and honesty. And I know I'm never full of shit if I'm talking about myself. As coded as it might be, and as many layers of other stuff on it that there are, at the end of the day, all the movies I generate are essentially based off my experience, and that tends to be my experience with my parents. It makes sense. I mean, again, this is layered. This is the idea of where it's coming from. And they say lots of good film comes from some aspect of truth. And I think that's what we see between Harker and her mum. They're never fully honest with each other. They're kind of giving each other half-truths the entire time. It's really interesting in that regard because you see the mother keep something from her child that kills her inside and changes her very fabric, moral being. I think that's really interesting that that's derived from his relationship with his parents and how it felt growing up for him and his mother keeping secrets from him. Revelation. There is no S. If you know, you know. When you layer the relationship he has with his mother, the parent and child relationship, all of the secrets, with the book of Revelation, you get Longlegs. So this part is what I believe to be the crime narrative and where it derives from and what brings the structure of the crimes and evilness. So there is a great TikTok that I do want to recommend, and I've linked this down below. Room for Scream explains in detail where some of the symbolism comes from, and I really recommend checking that out. I'm going to give you a broader explanation and with things I have additionally picked up and researched on, but I do truly recommend her it's absolutely quick breakdown, a lot of information, very well done. So the Book of Revelation, or Book of the Apocalypse, is the final book of the New Testament. Again, this is a simplified summary. It is seen to call Christians to remain faithful to God, and in doing so, this will bring salvation. It's about challenging and encouraging humans, witnessing, and a prophecy for the second coming. I believe all of the crimes come from Revelation. They say this in the film, but let's back it up. The book is full of intense imagery of beasts and dragons. The dragon is known as Satan, who appears sometimes as a serpent, as we know, and this is why we get all the imagery throughout Longlegs, the movie, of the serpents. I read some interpretations of the Book of Revelation. I have not read it myself, and I thought it was really interesting because I was listening to this Christian creator who said that a lot of people get really caught up in the symbols of the book and the imagery, instead of seeing the big picture. And I thought that that was such a good way of looking at it. Obviously, they weren't talking about Longlegs, but when you think about it, Harker gets so caught up in the imagery and trying to figure out what's going on that you can't see the bigger picture, which is the evil that is unraveling. In the first letter from Longlegs, she receives the wording "stood upon the sand of sea," which is extended in Revelation. "And I stood upon the sand of sea and saw the beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." Where have we heard 7 before? Well, if we go back to the script, when he is having the discussion with Harker, he says that he gave her the decision, like he has with several other people before, which we believe is parents, the decision to either die and have your children or to help him. So that is the 7 heads, I believe. And of course, the triangle symbol we see throughout the film is a call to the unholy trinity, which is the dragon, Satan, the beast of the sea, Longlegs, which is why he writes that as like a calling message to her about standing on the sand of the sea, and the beast of earth, which we believe is his accomplice, which is the mother. The unholy trinity, they all have to work together to get the work complete. And I think that he uses the birthdays. We figure out what the birthdays mean, which are, it's the triangle again. The birthdays are a calling card, a way to say, I did this, and to show that it was the devil's work. Okay, that was heavy. Let's talk about the dolls. In the film, Harker herself says that in some cultures, dolls are used as magic to control people. And during the reveal, it said that the doll made the little girl forget, told her where to look, told her what to not see. This is showing the doll's control throughout the complete narrative. If you watch again during the testing that she does, when she is sitting there and they're throwing out random generated numbers, pictures. She even recounts things that happen later in the film. She says father, mother, piano, door. These are things that are found where she finds the picture of Longlegs, which kind of brings all her memories back to the surface. The doll is controlling her their entire time. I think that's quite straightforward. The dolls are physically a great work of craftsmanship. Who knew? Like, that was the biggest reveal for me, was that Longlegs is a doll maker. I didn't see that coming. But what is really interesting is there is a part of the film where Harker is in her family home and she finds her teeth. It's not her baby teeth, it's her 10-year-old teeth. And if you look into that box, you also see parts of her hair. I believe that there could be a chance parts of her body were always used on this doll. And although she was already controlled by what was going on with her own doll, I feel like that made her more intuitive to other people's dolls because she is literally part of her physical being is part of them. Some of the hair on the dolls, they talk about it being real hair. It could have been from her head. Gross. But her mum was keeping this all around. Let's talk about the story and reveal, and then we'll get into the ending. We are given it straight up on a platter. We get a narration that shows us that the flashback was actually Harker and links everything together, shows how she went into people's houses dressed as a nun and really puts it all together for us in a very neat package. Although if you rewatch this film, you'll find there are clues throughout and there was no mistaking what actually happened. You didn't really need this section. I liked the reveal. It's always more creepy to understand how things happen, as long as they managed to do it in a picturesque fashion, and I felt like they did that really well, showing her entering the home as a nun and the reveals of, I guess, an example of what she would do as that. This reveal may have been obvious to a lot of people. It wasn't the first time I saw it. What I thought was really interesting on reflection is the note that she reads saying, tell them where you got this, how it came into your head. I'll cut off her, I'm not gonna say anymore, and bleed your mummy dry. Again, we got the rag, we got the mop. That is what he's referring to, bleeding her dry. If you say that you got this from your head, if you understand where you're getting these thoughts, then I will, your mother, and I'm already kind of bleeding her dry anyway. It's written right there. Mummy is written right there. And if we go back a little bit more, Carrie, who talks about being in limbo, Harker asks her point blank, do you remember the doll of yourself that you had? And she says, no, but either do you. So she is telling her, no, I don't remember my doll, but you don't either, and you have one. There is so much clues hidden within this dialogue. Even at the start, Agent Carter says to Harker, they have a conversation about Manson. She says Manson didn't do it by himself. He had an accomplice. And Agent Carter says to her, yeah, the Manson family. It's written right there. I think that the reveal was so clever and it really did catch me off guard. I know that it maybe was more pointed for a lot of people, but I was so hypnotized by what was happening on screen in the moment, in the present, that I didn't put all of the clues together. I thought being an Oz Perkins film, it was going to be a little bit more ambiguous. His films usually are, but this one was straight up and they gave you all the information. And as many people who say there's plot holes in this film, if you go back and watch it, there really isn't. They covered all their bases. Let's talk about the ending. Before Longlegs dies, he says he'll be a little bit of everywhere, waiting. I truly believe that you cannot kill evil. And we didn't, because even though this was not the last we heard of him. In fact, after the shooting of the doll, of Harker's doll, Harker wakes up in her basement, and this is a great callback. I love that they did this because it's a callback. She wakes up, she hears the phone ringing, and it's a while before she gets upstairs. This is meant to throw back to earlier in the film when she asks her mum why it took her so long to answer the phone, and it was because she was downstairs with Longlegs. But on the phone, Longlegs, who is supposed to be dead, tells her or reminds her about Ruby's birthday party, which is really interesting because it both sets her into a spiral to go protect Ruby, but also it puts her in the path where Longlegs wants her. And then that made me think, when she first met Ruby, Ruby asked her what she wanted to be when she was a kid, and she said actor. It makes me wonder, since she has been possessed by this doll the whole time, if this is her following this prophecy as it's being played out, and she's really playing into everything Longlegs wanted her to do. Because Longlegs also said when she became an agent, he laughed. Did he want her to become an agent because she would have access to a gun and it would be able to be put on this whole rampage, which happens towards the end of the film, where she kills not only her boss, but her mother, and becomes the killer? Before Longlegs dies, she asks him, who has been helping you? And he says, well, I'll let you get started now. And then he ends himself because his work is done. Is she meant to be continuing on that? Because in the very last scene, we know the ending. She is there with the doll, with Ruby's doll and Ruby, and she tries to kill or shoot the doll. Don't think you can kill the doll. Tries to shoot the doll and she runs out of ammo. Did Longlegs know how many bullets she would have? Probably. Even in that scene, the mother says, I'm going to go to the kitchen with you and I'll be back. And then the father says, you're not going to come back. So in some weird way, there was only enough bullets for that. And is she alone in that room with that doll, or with Ruby and that doll, for long enough that the doll can possess her now that her mind is unpossessed? It's almost like the mother had to get rid of the Harker doll so that she could become possessed by this other one. Now she either has to kill Ruby and herself, or become the mob, become the rag, and start doing the dirty work for the man downstairs. By the way, it's not beyond me that the man downstairs in her house, her family home, was Longlegs, as well as obviously in the interrogation office when they're talking about him beforehand, then he's also the man downstairs. Let's talk about cinematography. There's a couple things I really want to bring up. Perkins said that he's director of photography and he were inspired by Gus Van Sant films, especially Last Days and My Own Private Idaho. He was attracted to films that had a lot of loneliness, yet beauty. And people who are comparing this film to Hereditary, God knows why, you'd be interested to see that Perkins disavowed this. He said that Hereditary is a film that he watched once and never wants to see again. He hated the way it made him feel. He's saying it's a well-made film, but he was not going for that look at all. I think he moved away from the modern look that Hereditary has with all of its jewel tones, and instead he went towards a nostalgic ambience, which relies on classic cinematography and set design, especially because he's talking about memories, people's lives coming full circle, and the decades that comes from. I talked about cinematography a lot in my spoiler-free review. Of course, I absolutely love the composition of this film, the headroom, the way they played with nostalgia in the aspect ratio, the wide angle lens, which Oz Perkins has done that before. But what I didn't talk about is the bright, stark white. And this could mean a bunch of things. This could be a mocking of God and purity. Longlegs has white makeup. He only wears white clothes. Maybe it's a mocking of destroying purity, especially with the children. But the iconic color of this film is red. I'm sure you've gathered that from all of the promo marketing material, the title of the film. But red is also hidden as a kind of accent color throughout the film. I noticed a lot of exit signs and some that were half lit up towards the end of the film, kind of showing we were in the second half of the film. I don't know if that was intentional, but let me know if you picked that up too. There's those red glowing exit signs. Also, Harker's first kind of outing, you see her in this red shirt, and then when she's figuring out all of the puzzle pieces on the carpet, that is red, and she gets exhausted and she falls down and lays asleep. It just seemed like a big statement to have this like plush red carpet in the middle of this FBI building. Red also being the color of the devil, you know. Now we're towards the end of the video. I do want to say a couple of things that I didn't love in this film. I mean, it's not a perfect film by any means for me, but I really do appreciate the craftsmanship throughout. I thought the delivery was amazing. As I talk about, I love the dialogue. It was just a strange, anxiety-juicing film that really got in my bones and really gave me an uncomfortable feeling. And that's what I talk about when I say scare factor. It wasn't spooky, but it was strange. And let me tell you, last night our front door blew open. I thought he was there. I thought he was coming for me. I thought he was cuckooing me out of my house. But there were a couple of things that pulled me out of the story when watching, and it has to do with the symbolism, which is really sad because it all makes sense why it's in there, and I totally understand why they wanted to keep these aspects. Number one was the devil. I did not like the way they portrayed the devil in terms of the shadows that you see behind her during the film. I thought it was just such a stereotypical kind of Krampus shape, and I thought something more organic would work better, especially because Longlegs himself is very odd looking, and I just don't understand why we had to go with the stereotypical kind of horn shape. I thought it was a bit too much. The snakes, didn't love, but I understand now. I wish they were just incorporated in like different kind of ways instead of continuously using them as flashes on the screen, especially because they looked like more modern, I guess, framed, and the way it was put together, the stylization of it looked a little bit more modern than a nostalgic, I don't know, just a nostalgic snake. I don't know, a snake from the 70s doing something weird. And then the last bit was the smoke. I understand they wanted to go with some kind of visualization to show the release of the brain, or like the evil getting let out of the brain in the doll. I don't know why they had to show it at all, to be honest. What I think can be really clever in films that use a lot of supernatural elements is still having that point of, is this really happening or isn't it? Obviously in this film it is happening, but the way you could look at it either way, because what is the saying? The greatest trick the devil ever played was making you think he doesn't exist. I think that would have been a really good way to kind of put it together. I don't know, that just took me out just a little bit. I was under such the magic spell of Longlegs, and it really took me back. I hope I've explained myself well today. There was a lot there. I got a lot out of watching that film a second time. Let me tell you, every little piece of dialogue makes sense. You need to go back. I really enjoyed this film, and thank you so much for letting me talk about it with you. If you did like this video, let me know down below. Let me know your thoughts on Longlegs and what I might have missed. I'm sure I missed a bunch. I will talk to you guys all very soon. Don't forget, I do have a spoiler-free version of this if you want to check that out. And I did cover Kinds of Kindness. If you're looking for another strange film that you might want to check out in cinemas, that's spoiler-free as well. I'll talk to you guys very soon. Bye, friends.